I knew the moment I moved to Pine Ridge Estates in northern Minnesota that the HOA would be trouble. But I never imagined I would end up in a legal battle over snow removal. My name is Marcus Kimball, and I had been operating a snow plow business in the Twin Cities area for the better part of 15 years. When I bought my house in this gated community outside Duluth in October 2024, I made sure to check the bylaws regarding home businesses. There was nothing explicitly prohibiting snow removal services, and my lawyer had reviewed everything before I signed. The house itself was perfect, a 4-bedroom colonial with a detached garage large enough to store my equipment. I figured I had found my slice of heaven, away from the city chaos but close enough to maintain my client base. Winter came early that year. By mid-November, we had already gotten 8 inches, and my phone was ringing off the hook. I had contracts with several businesses in the area, including a hospital, 2 shopping centers, and about 30 residential driveways. My routine was simple. Wake up at 3 in the morning when snow fell, hit my commercial clients first, then work through my residential list before most people left for work. The first real problem started on a Tuesday morning in early December. I had just finished plowing the hospital parking lot and was heading back through Pine Ridge Estates to grab a quick coffee before continuing my route. The subdivision roads were a mess, nearly 6 inches of fresh powder from an overnight storm. Our HOA was supposed to contract with a service for the main roads, but they were notoriously slow, sometimes not showing up until late afternoon. I was driving my F350 with the plow attached, moving at maybe 15 miles per hour through the subdivision, when I saw her. A silver Lexus SUV had stopped dead in the middle of the road, blocking both lanes. Not pulled to the side, not in a driveway, just sitting there with its hazards on. I slowed to a stop about 20 feet back and waited. After a minute, nothing happened. The car did not move. I tapped my horn gently. Still nothing. I waited another minute, watching the clock on my dashboard tick forward. I had a tight schedule and this delay was already putting me behind. Finally, I put my truck in park and climbed out, trudging through the snow to the driver's side window. The woman inside was maybe 50 years old, with that particular haircut that seems to be standard issue for certain types of suburban women, short and severely angled. She was on her phone, completely oblivious to my presence. I tapped on her window. She jumped, clutching her chest dramatically, then rolled down the window about 2 inches. "What do you want?" "Madam, you are blocking the road. I need to get through." She looked at me like I had asked her to solve a calculus equation. "I am on an important phone call." "I understand, but you cannot stop in the middle of the street. Could you pull into a driveway?" "I will move when I am finished with my call." She started rolling up the window. I stood there for a moment, genuinely baffled. "Madam, I have to get to work. I have clients waiting." The window came back down. "Well, that sounds like a personal problem. I am the HOA president and I will move when I am ready." The window went back up. I walked back to my truck, shaking my head. I had dealt with difficult people before, but this was a new level of entitlement. I sat there for another 5 minutes, watching her gesture wildly while talking on her phone. Other neighbors were probably still asleep, so there was no one else around to witness this absurdity. Finally, I made a decision. The road was wide enough and there was a decent shoulder on the right side. I put my truck in gear, angled toward the shoulder, and carefully plowed around her Lexus, creating a clear path through the snow. My plow scraped against the frozen ground a bit, but I made it past without incident. In my rearview mirror, I saw her window come down. She was yelling something, but I kept driving. I had work to do, 3 hours later, I was finishing up Mrs. Patterson's driveway across town when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Marcus Kimball?" A man's voice, official sounding, speaking. "This is Officer Davidson with the Duluth Police Department. We have received a complaint about reckless snow plowing and property damage." "Can you tell me where you are right now?" My stomach dropped. "I am at a client's house. What is this about?" "A resident named Rebecca Carmichael claims you deliberately damaged her vehicle with your plow and created a hazardous driving situation. She is requesting that we file charges." I took a deep breath. "Officer, that is completely false. I went around her vehicle because she was blocking the entire road. I did not touch her car. Can you come down to the station to give a statement? Am I being charged with something?" "Not at this time, Mrs. Carmichael is quite insistent, though. It would help if we could get your side of the story on record." I agreed to come in after I finished my current job. Mrs. Patterson, a sweet elderly woman who had been watching from her window, came out as I was wrapping up. "Everything all right, Marcus?" "You look stressed." I explained the situation in broad strokes. She frowned, her wrinkled face creasing with concern. "That woman sounds awful. You need a witness. I know you always do good work." I thanked her but said it probably would not come to that. I was wrong. The police station was busy. People dealing with accident reports and winter-related incidents. Officer Davidson turned out to be a reasonable guy in his 40s, with the tired eyes of someone who had dealt with too many petty complaints. He took me to a small interview room and pulled out a notepad. "Walk me through what happened this morning." I explained everything, from finding Rebecca's car blocking the road to my decision to go around her. He took notes, nodding occasionally. "Did your plow make contact with her vehicle at any point?" "Absolutely not. I was very careful. I have been doing this for 15 years without a single accident." "She claims there is a scratch on her passenger side and that you drove recklessly close to her vehicle, throwing snow and ice that damaged her paint." I almost laughed. "Officer, I was going maybe 5 miles per hour, and snow does not damage paint." He sighed, clicking his pen. "Between you and me, I think this is a civil matter at best. But she knows the chief, apparently, so I have to follow up. Do you have any video footage? Dash cam?" My heart sank. "No, I have been meaning to install one, but I have not gotten around to it yet." "That is unfortunate. Look, I am going to file this report, but I do not see criminal charges here. She might try to sue you in small claims court for the damage she is claiming. Do you have insurance?" "Yes, comprehensive liability for the business." "Good. I would contact them and give them a heads up. And Marcus, get that dash cam. Today." I left the station feeling uneasy. Something about the way Rebecca had acted, the smugness in her voice when she said she was HOA president, made me think this was not over. I was right. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from the Pine Ridge Estates HOA Board of Directors. Inside was a cease and desist order, informing me that operating a commercial snow plowing business from my residence violated Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws, which prohibited commercial vehicle operations that create excessive noise, traffic, or disturbance to the peaceful enjoyment of the community. I read it 3 times, anger building with each pass. I grabbed my copy of the bylaws and found the section they referenced. It was vague, clearly written to give the board maximum discretion. But it said nothing specifically about snow plowing, and I had checked with a lawyer before buying the house. I called the HOA office immediately. A pleasant-sounding woman answered. "Pine Ridge Estates, HOA, this is Jennifer speaking." "Hi, Jennifer. This is Marcus Kimball." I just received a cease and desist letter and I would like to speak with someone about it." "Oh, Mr. Kimball, yes, I can transfer you to Mrs. Carmichael. She is our president." Of course she was. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "This is Rebecca." "Mrs. Carmichael, this is Marcus Kimball. I received your letter, and I think there has been a misunderstanding. I checked the bylaws extensively before purchasing my home, and there is nothing that prohibits my business." "Mr. Kimball, I think you will find that the board has broad authority to interpret the bylaws as we see fit. Your commercial truck is an eyesore. You leave at ungodly hours creating noise, and your behavior on Tuesday was aggressive and dangerous. I went around your car because you were blocking the entire road. That is not aggressive. That is problem solving. That is your interpretation. The board met yesterday and voted unanimously to enforce this bylaw. You have 30 days to cease all commercial operations or face daily fines of $250. This is retaliation because I went around your car. This is enforcement of community standards. If you do not like it, you are free to sell your home and leave." She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. This could not be happening. My business was my livelihood. I had clients depending on me, contracts to fulfill. And more importantly, I had not violated any rules. This was personal. I called my lawyer, David Chen, and explained the situation. He listened quietly, asking questions here and there. "Marcus, do you remember what I told you about HOAs when you bought the place? You said they could be difficult, but that I should be fine as long as I followed the rules. I also said that HOA boards have surprising amounts of power, and that fighting them can be expensive and time-consuming. That said, I think you have a good case here. The bylaw they are citing is not specific enough to justify this enforcement, especially since you verified everything before buying. But we need to respond properly." He agreed to draft a response letter, asserting my rights and pointing out the legal issues with their interpretation. In the meantime, he advised me to document everything and absolutely install that dash cam. I took his advice. The next day, I installed a high-quality dash cam system with front and rear cameras that recorded continuously while the truck was running. I also started keeping a detailed log of every trip, every client, every hour worked. The response from my lawyer went out a week later. It was professional but firm, essentially telling the HOA that their enforcement was arbitrary and likely unenforceable. It also noted that the timing of this action, immediately following the incident with Mrs. Carmichael's vehicle, suggested retaliatory motivation. 2 days after that, I got another letter. This one informed me that I was being fined $500 for unauthorized landscaping modifications to my front yard. I walked outside and stared at my yard. Nothing had changed. I had not touched a single plant or stone since moving in. I took photos, called David, and added it to our growing file. He said we were building a good case for harassment, but that these things took time to resolve. In the meantime, I had to decide whether to keep working or comply with their demands. I kept working. I had a family to support, even if it was just me. My ex-wife had gotten the house in Chicago, and I was starting over. I was not about to let some power-hungry HOA president destroy what I had built. The snow kept falling. Minnesota was having one of its classic winters, the kind where you measure accumulation in feet rather than inches. My phone never stopped ringing. Business was actually booming, which meant I was driving through Pine Ridge Estates several times a day, my big orange plow truck impossible to miss. I started noticing Rebecca's silver Lexus around the neighborhood more often. She always seemed to be there when I drove by, watching from her car or standing in her driveway. It was creepy, honestly. I waved once, trying to be civil. She just stared. The harassment escalated. I received fines for parking my truck in my own driveway, supposedly because it extended past the garage door. I received fines for excessive idling, even though I never let my truck run for more than a few minutes. I received a fine for having a business magnet on my truck door, claiming it violated advertising restrictions. Every fine went into David's file. Every fine got a formal response denying the charges. And every fine went unpaid because David advised me not to pay anything that we were going to challenge in court. It all came to a head on a Friday morning in mid-January. We had gotten hammered with a massive storm overnight, nearly 14 inches of heavy, wet snow. I had been out since 2 in the morning, plowing continuously. By 7, I was exhausted and running on pure caffeine and adrenaline. I was heading home through Pine Ridge Estates, looking forward to a hot shower and a few hours of sleep before the next wave hit. The subdivision roads were passable now, carved into neat corridors of white. That is when I saw her again. Rebecca's Lexus was parked sideways across the main entrance to the community, completely blocking the road. Not hazards on this time, just sitting there. She was standing next to it, arms crossed, watching me approach. I stopped my truck about 30 feet away and got out. The wind was brutal and the temperature had dropped to about 5 degrees, not the weather for standing around. "Mrs. Carmichael, you are blocking the road again. I need to get through." "You are not going anywhere until we settle this, Mr. Kimball. You owe the HOA over $3,000 in fines. You are operating a business in violation of our bylaws, and you are making this community look like a trailer park with that monstrosity of a truck. I do not owe you anything. Those fines are illegitimate and my lawyer is handling it. Now please move your car, make me." I stared at her. She was serious. She was actually daring me to somehow move her car. The absurdity of it would have been funny if I was not so tired. "Mrs. Carmichael, it is 5 degrees outside. I am not playing games. Move your car. I am calling the police to report that you are threatening me." She pulled out her phone. I walked back to my truck, climbed in, and locked the doors. If she wanted to call the cops, fine. Let them deal with her. I was not going to give her the satisfaction of losing my temper. I sat there, engine running, heat blasting while she talked on her phone. She was animated, gesturing toward my truck, clearly embellishing whatever story she was telling. After about 5 minutes, she got back in her Lexus, but did not move it. We sat there in a standoff. Me in my truck, her in her SUV, both vehicles running, blocking the only entrance to a community of 200 homes. Other residents started appearing, cars backing up behind both of us. A few people got out, trying to figure out what was happening. Tom Reynolds, my next-door neighbor and one of the few people in the community who had been friendly, walked up to my window. I rolled it down. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" I explained the situation. He shook his head in disgust. "Rebecca is off the rails. Half the neighborhood is sick of her power trips. Is there any way around? Not unless I go off-road, and I am not risking my truck in this snow depth." Another neighbor, Frank Morrison, walked up to Rebecca's car. I could see him talking to her through the window, making calm-down gestures with his hands. She shook her head emphatically. Frank threw his hands up in frustration and walked back to his car. 20 minutes passed. The line of cars behind us grew to about 15 vehicles. People were late for work, clearly angry. A few of them started honking. Rebecca did not budge. Finally, I made a decision. I could not sit here all day, and neither could these other people. The shoulder on the right side of the road was plowed down to bare pavement from all my earlier passes. There was maybe 8 feet of snow-covered grass between the pavement and the fence line. It would be tight, but I could probably make it. I put my truck in gear, turned my wheel hard right, and started forward. My plow was angled left, pushing snow as I carved a path through the shoulder and onto the grass. The truck bounced and lurched over the frozen ground, but my four-wheel drive held. I gave Rebecca's Lexus plenty of clearance, at least 6 feet, and focused on not hitting the fence. 30 seconds later, I was past her and back on the pavement. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw other cars starting to follow my path. Rebecca jumped out of her Lexus, screaming something I could not hear. I drove home, parked in my driveway, and stumbled inside. I was too tired to even shower. I collapsed on my couch and was asleep in seconds. The pounding on my door woke me up. I checked my phone, groggy and disoriented. I had been asleep for maybe 45 minutes. The pounding continued. Police. Open the door. My heart racing, I got up and opened the door. 2 officers stood there, hands resting on their duty belts. One was Officer Davidson, who I had met before. The other was a younger woman I did not recognize. Marcus Kimball, the female officer asked. Yes, that is me. We need you to come with us. You are being arrested for criminal property damage and reckless endangerment. I could not believe what I was hearing. What are you talking about? Officer Davidson looked uncomfortable. Marcus, Rebecca Carmichael claims you deliberately used your plow to spray her vehicle with snow and ice, causing damage and putting her in danger. She has photos and witnesses. That is insane. I went around her because she was blocking the road. There were a dozen witnesses to that. We still need you to come to the station. You can explain everything there. They let me change clothes and grab my phone. I was not handcuffed, which I took as a small mercy. The ride to the station was silent. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how this had spiraled so far out of control. At the station, they put me in the same interview room as before. This time, though, there was a detective waiting. His name was Detective Morris, a heavy-set man in his 50s with the demeanor of someone who had seen everything twice. Mr. Kimball, I have reviewed the complaint from Mrs. Carmichael. She claims this is the second time you have acted recklessly around her vehicle. She has photos showing damage to her car and several statements from residents saying you drove erratically. Detective, I would like to call my lawyer, he nodded. That is your right. But I will tell you, this does not look good. Mrs. Carmichael is a respected member of the community, serves on several charity boards, knows a lot of important people. Her story is convincing. Her story is also completely false. David arrived within an hour. They let us speak privately in a small conference room. Marcus, what happened? I told him everything from the blockade to my decision to go around her. His expression grew darker as I talked. You have video? Yes, I have the dash cam footage. It is all right there. His face brightened. That changes everything. We need to get that footage preserved immediately. Where is the camera? In my truck, still recording. It overwrites after 72 hours. We explained to Detective Morris about the dash cam. He agreed to send an officer with me to retrieve the camera and preserve the footage. The female officer from earlier, whose name tag read Chen, drove me back to my house. For what it is worth, she said during the drive, I think Mrs. Carmichael is exaggerating. But the chief is friends with her husband, so everyone is taking this seriously. Her husband, Douglas Carmichael, he is a big-shot real estate developer, owns half the commercial property in Duluth. They are connected. That explained a lot. We got to my house and I retrieved the dash cam. Officer Chen placed it in an evidence bag and documented the chain of custody. Back at the station, they had a tech download the footage onto a secure drive. David and I watched it with Detective Morris. The video was crystal clear. It showed Rebecca's Lexus blocking the road. the line of cars behind me, and my careful navigation around her vehicle. At no point did my plow come anywhere close to her car. When I passed her, there was clearly at least 6 feet of clearance. Detective Morris leaned back in his chair. "Well, that is pretty definitive. She was blocking traffic and you went around her safely." He paused. "However, there is still the matter of property damage. She is claiming her car has scratches and dents from your plow." David pulled out his phone. "Which is interesting because I took the liberty of pulling up Mrs. Carmichael's insurance claim history. She filed a claim for the exact same damage last month after an incident in a parking lot. The claim was paid out, and the repairs were supposedly completed. If she is now claiming this is new damage from Marcus, that is insurance fraud." Detective Morris raised his eyebrows. "How did you get that information?" "I have a contact at the insurance company. They were concerned about the pattern of claims. Mrs. Carmichael has filed 6 claims in the past 2 years, all for minor body damage." The detective drummed his fingers on the table. "This is getting complicated. Let me make some calls." David and I waited in the conference room. He was on his phone, typing emails and making notes. I just sat there, exhausted and overwhelmed. After about an hour, Detective Morris returned with Officer Davidson. "Mr. Kimball, you are free to go. We are not filing charges. The video evidence clearly shows you did not act recklessly or cause damage to Mrs. Carmichael's vehicle." He hesitated. "However, I need to advise you to be very careful. Mrs. Carmichael has a lot of influence in this town, and she is not happy about this outcome." David stood up. "Detective, my client has been harassed by his HOA for weeks. We have documented dozens of bogus fines, all stemming from his refusal to be bullied by Mrs. Carmichael. This is retaliation, pure and simple. What are you going to do about that?" "That is a civil matter. You will have to take it up with the courts." We left the station. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I had lost an entire day to this nonsense. "David, what do we do now?" "Now we go on the offensive. I am going to file a lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, abuse of power, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are also going to file a complaint with the State Insurance Fraud Division about Rebecca's pattern of claims. And we are going to send a demand letter to the HOA board threatening legal action if they do not rescind every fine and leave you alone." That sounds expensive. It will be. But you are in the right, and I think we can win. More importantly, I think we can make this expensive enough for the HOA that they will back down. Over the next 2 weeks, David was a whirlwind of legal activity. He filed our lawsuit in county court, served papers to Rebecca personally, and sent formal demand letters to every member of the HOA board. The response was immediate and hostile. The HOA hired their own lawyer, a firm from Minneapolis that specialized in HOA defense. They filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the board had acted within their authority and that I was a vexatious litigant. David countered with our evidence, including the timeline of fines, the video footage, and statements from neighbors about Rebecca's behavior. The insurance fraud complaint was harder to track. David's contact at the insurance company confirmed they were investigating, but these things moved slowly. In the meantime, the company had denied Rebecca's latest claim pending the outcome of their investigation. I kept working. Every time it snowed, I was out there plowing. I made sure to keep my dash cam running at all times and documented every trip through Pine Ridge Estates. Rebecca's Lexus was noticeably absent from the streets now. I suspected her lawyer had told her to stay away from me. The HOA board meeting in early February was standing room only. Word had spread about the lawsuit, and residents were taking sides. Some supported Rebecca, viewing me as a troublemaker who was bringing down property values with my commercial truck. Others were sick of the board's heavy-handed tactics and saw me as standing up to tyranny. I attended with David. Rebecca sat at the front table with 4 other board members, all of them looking uncomfortable. When it came time for resident comments, things got heated. Tom Reynolds spoke first. I have lived in Pine Ridge Estates for 12 years, and I have never seen the board act this vindictively. Marcus was doing nothing wrong. He runs a legitimate business, and he actually makes our streets safer by plowing them before the contracted service shows up. This vendetta needs to end. A woman named Patricia spoke next, defending Rebecca. We have rules for a reason. If we let everyone run commercial operations out of their homes, this community will fall apart. The board is just enforcing standards. Frank Morrison stood up. I have read the bylaws front to back. There is nothing specific about snow plowing. The board is interpreting the rules to target one person, and that is wrong. I move that we recall the entire board and hold new elections. The room erupted. People were shouting, some supporting the recall, others defending the current board. Rebecca banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. This is out of order. Recalls require a petition with signatures from 20% of homeowners. You cannot just shout about it at a meeting. Frank smiled. Already done. I have signatures from 43 homeowners, which is 22% of our community. I am submitting the petition now. He walked to the front and handed her a thick stack of papers. Rebecca's face went pale. She flipped through the pages, her hands shaking. This will have to be verified. I am sure it will be. In the meantime, I suggest the board consider rescinding all the fines against Marcus Kimball before this gets more embarrassing for everyone. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that. David and I left early, satisfied that things were finally moving in the right direction. The recall petition was verified a week later. The HOA bylaws required a special election within 30 days. Rebecca tried to fight it, claiming some signatures were invalid, but an independent auditor confirmed that everything was in order. In the meantime, our lawsuit was progressing. The judge had denied the HOA's motion to dismiss and ordered both parties to mediation. The session was scheduled for late February, held in a conference room at the county courthouse. The mediator was a retired judge named Patricia Stone, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who made it clear she had little patience for pettiness. She started by hearing Rebecca's side. Mr. Kimball has been operating a commercial business in violation of community bylaws. His truck is loud, unsightly, and creates safety hazards. The board was acting within its authority to enforce community standards. Judge Stone looked at the timeline David had prepared. Mrs. Carmichael, I see here that Mr. Kimball purchased his home in October, but the board did not raise any concerns about his business until December, specifically 2 days after an incident where you blocked a road and he went around your vehicle. Can you explain that timing? Rebecca stammered. It took time to investigate the complaint. What complaint? According to these records, you initiated the enforcement action yourself. There is no mention of any other resident complaining about Mr. Kimball's truck. David leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may. We have obtained emails from Mrs. Carmichael to other board members, sent the same day as the incident with the blocked road. In those emails, she explicitly states that she wants to make an example of Mr. Kimball and show him that the board is in charge. This was retaliation, pure and simple. Judge Stone read the emails, her expression darkening. Mrs. Carmichael, this does not look good for your case. Using HOA authority for personal vendettas is exactly the kind of abuse that courts do not tolerate. The HOA's lawyer, a slick guy named Richard Porter, tried to redirect. Your Honor, regardless of motivation, the board has the discretion to interpret and enforce bylaws. Mr. Kimball's business clearly falls under the commercial activity restrictions. Does it? I have read the relevant bylaw, and it is quite vague. It mentions noise, traffic, and disturbance, but does not define those terms. Mr. Kimball leaves early in the morning to avoid disturbing neighbors. His truck is parked in his own garage most of the time. Where is the disturbance? Porter shuffled his papers. The truck itself is aesthetically displeasing. So are a lot of things. That is not a legal standard. Judge Stone turned to David. What is your client seeking in terms of settlement, all fines rescinded and refunded? A formal apology from the board. A written acknowledgement that Mr. Kimball's business is permitted under the current bylaws, and reimbursement of our legal fees to date, which total approximately $15,000. Rebecca stood up. That is absurd. We are not paying his legal fees. Judge Stone gave her a hard look. Sit down, Mrs. Carmichael. You are not helping your case. She turned to Porter. Counselor, I suggest you advise your clients to settle. If this goes to trial, I think you will lose and the damages could be much higher. Mr. Kimball could seek compensation for emotional distress, lost business opportunities due to harassment, and punitive damages. We could be talking 6 figures. The room went silent. Porter asked for a recess to consult with his clients. Judge Stone gave them 30 minutes. David and I waited in a separate conference room. He was smiling. That went better than I expected. Stone sees right through their nonsense. You think they will settle? Probably. The recall election is coming up and Rebecca knows she is going to lose. If she settles now, she can at least control the narrative a bit. If we go to trial and win, it will be a public humiliation. Porter returned with an offer. All fines rescinded, no admission of wrongdoing, but they would add a clarification to the bylaws explicitly permitting snow removal businesses. No apology, no legal fees. David rejected it immediately. My client wants his legal fees. He should not have to pay for defending himself against harassment. They went back and forth for another hour. Finally, they agreed to rescind the fines, pay $10,000 toward legal fees, and add the bylaw clarification. No formal apology, but a statement from the board acknowledging that their enforcement actions were not consistent with the board's usual practices and may have caused undue stress to Mr. Kimball. It was not everything we wanted, but it was enough. I agreed to the settlement. The recall election happened 3 weeks later. Rebecca and 2 other board members were voted out. Tom Reynolds was elected as the new president, along with Frank Morrison and 2 other reform candidates. Their first action was to formally ratify the settlement agreement and issue a public apology to me at the next meeting. Rebecca moved out of Pine Ridge Estates that spring. Rumor had it that her husband Douglas was furious about the settlement and the legal fees, which their personal homeowner's insurance would not cover. They sold their house at a loss and relocated to a different suburb. The insurance fraud investigation concluded in April. Rebecca was charged with attempted fraud for trying to claim damage that had already been repaired under a previous claim. She pleaded guilty to a reduced charge and was ordered to pay restitution to the insurance company and perform community service. No jail time, but a permanent mark on her record. As for me, I continued running my snow removal business. The new HOA board was reasonable and professional. They even contracted with me to handle the subdivision roads on an emergency basis when the regular service was delayed. My reputation in the community improved significantly after word spread about how I had stood up to the old board. I installed better lighting in my driveway, added sound insulation to my garage to minimize noise, and made an effort to be a good neighbor. Tom and his wife started inviting me to neighborhood barbecues. Frank and I became good friends, bonding over our shared experience of dealing with Rebecca's tyranny. The case became something of a legend in HOA circles. David told me that other lawyers were using our story as an example of how HOA boards can abuse their power and why homeowners should document everything. Several residents from other communities reached out to me, asking for advice on fighting their own HOA battles. Looking back, I realize how easily things could have gone differently. If I had not installed that dash cam, if I had not kept detailed records, if I had not found a lawyer willing to fight, Rebecca might have succeeded in driving me out of my home. The system gives HOA boards enormous power with very little oversight, and it takes resources and determination to fight back. But I also learned that standing up to bullies matters. When I refused to be intimidated, other neighbors found the courage to speak up too. The recall election was not just about me. It was about everyone who was tired of being pushed around by petty tyrants who happened to get elected to a homeowner's board. The lawsuit cost me about $12,000 total, after the settlement covered part of my legal fees. It was worth every penny. My business is thriving, I love my house, and I have actual friends in the community now. Rebecca is gone, facing the consequences of her actions in multiple ways. Winter came around again the following year. The first big storm hit in November, dumping 10 inches overnight. I was up at my usual time, 2 in the morning, climbing into my truck with a thermos of coffee. The dash cam came on automatically, recording as always. I started with my commercial clients, then worked through the residential list. As I drove through Pine Ridge Estates around 6 in the morning, I saw Tom standing in his driveway, waving. I stopped and rolled down my window. "Morning, Marcus. Roads look great. Thanks. That was a heavy one. Hey, a bunch of us are getting together for breakfast at the diner in town. Want to join after you finish up?" "Yeah, that sounds good. I should be done in about an hour." "Perfect. See you there." I drove off, my plow scraping the pavement, clearing a path through the fresh snow. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was going to be a good day. The breakfast was relaxed and fun, a group of neighbors sharing stories and complaining about the cold in that fond way Minnesotans do. Nobody mentioned the drama from the previous year. It had become history, a story we all shared but did not need to dwell on. Over the following months, the new HOA board implemented several reforms. They revised the bylaws to be more specific and less open to interpretation. They created a formal appeals process for fines and enforcement actions. They held quarterly town halls where residents could voice concerns directly. The community felt different, more collaborative and less authoritarian. I expanded my business, adding a second truck and hiring an employee named Jake, a younger guy who was reliable and hard-working. We could handle twice as many clients, and my income increased substantially. I paid off the legal bills by spring and started saving for upgrades to my equipment. The anniversary of the big confrontation came and went without fanfare. I drove past the spot where Rebecca had blocked the road so many times, and every time I remembered how angry and helpless I had felt. But I also remembered the satisfaction of seeing the dash cam footage exonerate me, the relief when the settlement was signed, and the vindication of watching Rebecca lose her position of power. In a way, she had done me a favor. The publicity from the lawsuit brought me new clients. People liked the idea of supporting a small business owner who had stood up to an abusive HOA. My phone rang constantly during snow season, and I had to turn down work because I was at capacity. David and I stayed in touch. He referred other clients to me and occasionally sent me articles about HOA disputes around the country. The stories were always similar: petty bureaucrats drunk on tiny amounts of power, homeowners caught in Kafkaesque enforcement nightmares, legal battles over absurd violations. My case was far from unique, but I had been lucky enough to have the resources and determination to fight back. The insurance fraud charge against Rebecca made local news briefly. A short article in the Duluth paper mentioned her guilty plea and the restitution order. The comments section was brutal, with people sharing their own stories of her difficult behavior. Apparently, I was not the only person she had targeted over the years. Douglas Carmichael's real estate empire took a hit too. Several of his projects faced protests and delays after word spread about his wife's legal troubles. He eventually sold some of his holdings and scaled back his operations. I felt a little bad about that, since he had not been directly involved in the HOA situation, but not bad enough to lose sleep over it. He had presumably known about Rebecca's behavior and done nothing to stop it. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Winters were busy, with long hours and constant demands. Springs and summers were quieter, giving me time to maintain equipment and drum up business for the next season. I started dating someone I met at a Chamber of Commerce event, a woman named Sarah who ran a landscaping company. We bonded over our shared experiences dealing with difficult clients and the challenges of running small businesses. The second recall election since my victory happened that fall. Tom and the other reform board members ran unopposed. The community had no appetite for returning to the old ways. Attendance at HOA meetings was higher than ever, with residents actually engaged in governance rather than leaving everything to a small group of power-hungry individuals. I presented at one of those meetings, giving a talk about winter safety and the importance of proper snow removal. It was well received and several residents thanked me afterward. A few years earlier, that same community had been trying to run me out of town. The change was remarkable. My house needed some work, particularly the roof, which had suffered during a brutal winter storm. I hired a local contractor and got the repairs done quickly. The new HOA board approved my plans without hassle, a stark contrast to the old regime's constant roadblocks. Jake worked out so well that I hired a second employee, a woman named Michelle who had experience with heavy equipment. We became a tight crew, working efficiently through storms and building a reputation for reliability. Client retention was nearly perfect, and word-of-mouth referrals brought steady growth. The legal system moved slowly, but justice eventually caught up with Rebecca in another way. The insurance company that she had defrauded filed a civil lawsuit seeking additional damages beyond the criminal restitution. They argued that her pattern of fraudulent claims had cost them tens of thousands of dollars in payouts and investigation costs. The case was still ongoing last I heard, but Rebecca was facing the possibility of a significant judgment against her. I sometimes wondered if she felt any remorse, if she understood how her need to control others had destroyed her own life. Probably not. People like Rebecca rarely have that kind of self-awareness. They always see themselves as the victim, even when they are the perpetrator. The third winter in Pine Ridge Estates was the smoothest yet. I had my systems dialed in, my equipment was reliable, and the community supported my work. When big storms hit, I plowed the subdivision roads without waiting for the contracted service, and residents appreciated it. The HOA board eventually formalized this arrangement, paying me a retainer to handle emergency snow removal. I bought a newer truck, a beast of a machine with a bigger plow and better fuel efficiency. The old F-350 became Jake's vehicle, and we ran both trucks simultaneously during major storms. Our capacity doubled again, and I started thinking about expanding beyond snow removal into other seasonal services. Sarah and I got engaged that spring. We planned a small wedding for the following summer, just close friends and family. Tom and Frank were both invited, of course. They had become more than neighbors. They were genuine friends who had stood by me during the worst of the HOA nightmare. The criminal restitution from Rebecca was paid in full by that June. The amount was relatively small, just a few $1,000s, but it felt significant. Every dollar was a reminder that actions have consequences, even for people who think they are above accountability. The lawsuit against the HOA was officially closed, all terms of the settlement fulfilled. David sent me the final documents with a congratulatory note. We had won, completely and definitively. The precedent from my case had been cited in 2 other HOA disputes in Minnesota, helping other homeowners fight back against overreach. I framed the settlement agreement and hung it in my office, not out of spite but as a reminder. A reminder that standing up for yourself matters, that documentation and persistence pay off, and that bullies lose when people refuse to be intimidated. Life was good. My business was thriving, my relationship was strong, and my community actually felt like a community. The nightmare year with Rebecca seemed like ancient history, a bad dream that had ended with me waking up to a better reality. I still drive through Pine Ridge Estates every time it snows, my plow scraping the pavement, my dash cam recording everything. But now I wave at neighbors as I pass, and they wave back. Kids sled on the hills I create with my plow piles. People shovel their driveways knowing that the roads will be clear when they need to leave. The orange truck that Rebecca called a monstrosity is now a welcome sight, associated with safety and reliability rather than conflict. When I park in my driveway, nobody complains. When I leave at 3 in the morning, nobody files noise complaints. The community understands that my work benefits everyone. Looking back on that cold December morning when Rebecca first blocked the road, I realize it was a turning point. I could have backed down, sold my house, moved somewhere else, and avoided the whole conflict. But I chose to fight, and that choice made all the difference. The HOA system in America is flawed, giving too much power to volunteers who often have no business managing anything. But it is the system we have, and sometimes the only way to change it is to stand up and demand better. My case became a small example of what is possible when homeowners organize and push back against abuse. Rebecca is somewhere else now, probably tormenting some other community with her need for control. But she is not my problem anymore. She is a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when petty power goes unchecked. Her legacy in Pine Ridge Estates is the reform movement she accidentally sparked, the better governance that emerged from her failures. As for me, I am exactly where I want to be. I have a home I love, a business I built, and a community that appreciates my work. The journey was harder than it should have been, but the destination made it worthwhile. Every time I drive through Pine Ridge Estates with my plow, pushing snow aside and clearing paths, I am reminded that I earned my place here. Nobody can take that away. The story could have ended differently. Without the dash cam, without David's legal expertise, without Tom and Frank's support, Rebecca might have won. I might be the one who moved away, defeated and demoralized. But I got lucky, and I was stubborn, and I had people who believed in me. That combination was enough. Sometimes I see news stories about HOA disputes in other parts of the country, and I recognize the patterns. The overreaching board, the targeted homeowner, the escalating conflict, the legal battle. Every time I think about reaching out, offering advice, sharing my story. Sometimes I do, sending an email or making a phone call to someone I have never met, trying to help them navigate the nightmare I survived. The responses are always grateful. People feel alone when they are fighting an HOA, like they are the only ones dealing with this kind of insanity. Knowing that others have faced similar battles and one gives them hope. I am happy to provide that hope, to be a resource for others in the same position I was in. My case will never make national news or become a landmark legal precedent. It was a local dispute, resolved through mediation, affecting a small community in Minnesota. But for me, and for the people in Pine Ridge Estates who lived through it, it was everything. It changed our community for the better and showed that ordinary people can stand up to abuse and win. As winter approaches again, I am ready. My trucks are maintained, my employees are trained, and my dash cams are recording. The roads will get covered in snow, and I will be there to clear them, doing the work I love in the community I fought to stay in. Rebecca's ghost still lingers in the memories of longtime residents, but she gets fainter every year, replaced by better stories and healthier leadership. That is the real victory, not the settlement or the legal fees or even the recall election. The real victory is that Pine Ridge Estates is a better place now than it was when I moved in. The HOA serves the residents instead of bullying them. The board is accountable and transparent. The bylaws are clear and fair. None of that would have happened if I had not fought back. So yes, Rebecca Carmichael blocked my plow with her car, and yes, she called the cops when I plowed around her. But in the end, her attempt to destroy me backfired spectacularly. She lost her position, her reputation, and her home. I kept mine and gained a community in the process. Sometimes justice works exactly the way it should. And that cold December morning turned out to be the beginning of something better for everyone, except the bully who started it.